So with the Oscars coming up, I figured I'd go back and review what was one of my favorite movies of last year, even though it didn't make my best of the year list because I had just gotten around to seeing it fairly recently. So Green Book tells the true story of an Italian-American man named Tony, who's not very well off. He's just kind of trying to make a living, and he's a driver. And he takes on this African-American rich musician named Don and gets paid a lot of money to drive him all around the country to a bunch of different places that he has to go so that he can do all of his performances. And he has to take this thing that's called a Green Book, hence the name of the movie, with him, which contains all the different places that an African American person could stay at the time because this movie took place in the 1960s. And guys, I'm going to get into spoilers in this review, but if you haven't seen it, I wouldn't really worry about it. There isn't that much to spoil. This movie is based on a true story, so I'd say you can probably go ahead and watch this even if you haven't seen the movie. So starting off with the positives, I'm going to go with the performances. The two main characters in this movie are Tony and Don, and they're both portrayed perfectly. Tony, the main character, the driver, played by Viggo Mortensen, just fantastic. It's hard to imagine that this is the same guy that played Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings movies, because he just completely disappears into this role of Tony, who's kind of an ignorant guy. Because of the way he's been brought up, he doesn't really understand certain groups of people, and when he gets around these very sophisticated people, when he has to take on to his different places, he doesn't exactly know how to act, and even he's not a bad guy. He doesn't understand a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different cultures other than his own. And he gets better at that throughout the movie. And then you got Don, who's the second character played by Mahershala Ali, who does a fantastic job as well. He's one of my favorite actors going today. He got nominated for Best Supporting Actor for this movie for a reason. He just does an amazing job of this guy who doesn't really know how to fit in anywhere because he's an African American guy who's in the 1960s where racism is very prevalent, and he's a very rich guy. He's a musician, so pretty much everyone he's around is not African American because that's just the way it was then. And he also happens to be a guy who is homosexual, and at least it's heavily hinted at that in the movie. There's a scene it basically flat out says it, even though I guess it really doesn't. But what I'm saying is he's a guy that doesn't know where he fits in. He doesn't fit in anywhere, and he's alone, even though he's got a lot of money. He doesn't feel like he's really got anything to live for, and you kind of realize this throughout the movie between the interactions between him and Tony. They really get to know each other, and the arcs that these two characters go throughout the movie is just fantastic. Starting with Tony, he's a guy who, like I said before, he's ignorant, and it's not his fault. It's just kind of the way he is. He's an Italian-American who's always kind of been living paycheck to paycheck, and he gets this big job, and he's reluctant to take it because he doesn't really like people that don't look like him at first because he doesn't understand them. And once he gets to know Don, he realizes that he's a really good guy, and that he eventually wants to spend more time with him, and at the end of the movie invites him into his house. But the journey that he goes on throughout this movie is amazing, and he learns so much from this guy, Don, who's a very sophisticated man, pretty much the complete opposite of Tony, which is really interesting because it's almost against stereotype, because Tony he's a white American, so you'd think that he'd be rich and wouldn't have to struggle at all, and that Don would be kind of the opposite, that he'd be living paycheck to paycheck and would have a hard time making ends meet. But it's the exact opposite. The African American guy is really rich, doesn't know where to fit in, and the white guy, Italian, whatever, I'm close enough. He basically is white. I feel bad for saying that, but no, I mean, in the context of this movie, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And he doesn't understand how that Don is like this, because he has these views of people, these stereotypes of people that, African American people, they should all be eating fried chicken and, not have a lot of money and stuff like that. Drink Kool-Aid and he has all these stereotypes about what this guy should be, and he's not. And throughout the movie, he learns that maybe I shouldn't stereotype people, because what someone looks like doesn't mean everything, doesn't mean anything actually, and that he really learned from that experience. He learned so much from Don, and not only that, Don learned so much from Tony about how to relax a little bit and how to have fun in life, because he's a guy that's very uptight about everything. He doesn't want to eat in the car. He doesn't want to eat without plate or without silverware or without napkins. And there's this really cool scene where Tony teaches Don how to eat fried chicken. And I don't know why. For some reason, a lot of people are mad about that scene. I don't really understand why. Oh, a black guy or white guy showing a black guy how to eat fried chicken. So? Why does that matter? The black guy, African American guy, is someone who's never lived this type of lifestyle. So he doesn't understand the whole eating fast food and eating on the go and not always having a plate or silverware with him and not having fancy meals all the time, because he's a rich musician who plays for rich people and makes a lot of money and is always around rich, sophisticated people. So, he doesn't understand this world that Tony lives in, just like Tony doesn't understand the world that Don lives in. And as the movie goes on, they get closer to each other, and they learn a lot more about each other's lifestyle and how not to stereotype, especially in Tony's case, and in Don's case, how to enjoy life more and not be so uptight about everything. And in Tony's case, how to be more polite to people and not swear in every other word and just not to judge people by the way that they look. I should mention as well, there's kind of a third character in this movie played by Linda Cardellini. It is Tony's wife, and even though she isn't in a ton of the movie, keeps going back to her sometimes, and she does a damn good job. She's a really good actress, and there's this kind of subplot throughout the movie where Tony is writing her these letters because he's gone with Don for a really long time. I mean, I think they said a month at least. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry. It was it was a month or a month and a half or maybe even 2 months, something like that. But so that's a really long time without seeing your wife, and he's writing her these letters, and at first they're just kind of ridiculous, and of course it's something that he would do because that's just the way he is. And he's like, oh, I'm eating fried chicken right now, and I had a steak earlier, and I'm also drinking a beer, and I'm having a really good time. And it's fun, it's cool, because that's just the way he is. But then Don starts teaching him how to write letters that are kind of more meaningful and talking about how much he misses her and how much he loves her and how much he loved her from the first moment that he saw her. And it's really cool. This is one of the best kind of plot lines throughout the movie, because you can see Tony growing a lot, and you can see the happiness on his wife's face. Dolores, that's her name, Dolores. You can see the happiness on her face when she sees these letters, and she even realizes, like, at the end, she thanks Don for helping Tony write the letters. She knows that Tony isn't that sophisticated, but it's really cool how these two characters really change each other's lives essentially forever, because they're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum, and throughout spending so much time together, they become close friends. And I think it's a really cool story, the way that they did that, and the arcs these characters went through, the performances, just all incredible. Now, if there's one complaint I have with this movie, it's that it feels a tiny bit long. Now, I know it's not that long, it's only like 2 hours and 10 minutes, but for the type of movie that this is, I feel like they could have shortened it up maybe 10, 15, or 20 minutes, and they could have still brought the same message that they did and told the same exact story that they wanted to tell. So that's the only real complaint I have with this movie, is that it felt a tiny bit long, because after I watched it, I'm like, wow, that was a long movie. And then I realized it was only 2 hours and 10 minutes. Some movies can be that long. This one, it seemed to be a bit longer than it had to be for them to tell the story that they wanted to, and to get the message across that they wanted to get across. Nevertheless, they did a great job with that, And that's really the only real negative I can think of off the top of my head for this movie. I'm actually going to bounce back for a second and talk about the humor. This movie was surprisingly hilarious. I mean, I expected it to be a full-on drama, and it definitely was a drama, and the main focus of this movie is the characters and their arcs and where they start and where they end and the story, but the humor in this movie really landed, and it kind of played off the fact that Tony is not a very smart guy, and a lot of times he's around these very sophisticated people because he has to be, because he's driving Don around, and just the humor that they sprinkled in throughout this movie landed very well for me. So this movie is funny at times. It is a heartwarming, awesome story that is based on a real story, and the arcs that these characters go through are incredible. The performances are just amazing. Man, this is just a really, it's a feel-good movie for sure, and they pulled that off so well. I think this movie, of the choices for the best picture, granted I have not seen all of them, I would be totally okay if this movie won. In fact, I would probably prefer it, to be completely honest. And I'm going to give Green Book an 8.5 out of 10. Really good movie. So there you have it, guys. Have you seen Green Book yet? If so, what do you think? Drop a comment below. I really did like this movie. Feel good movie. It was a lot of, I don't know if I want to say fun, but it really was a lot of fun watching this movie. And it was just really cool to see the journeys that these characters went on together. And guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see future content, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you get notified when I post a video. Spread the word, and I will see you soon.